Yep. Whoa. Hello. We need a bigger room. This is great. My name's John Galloway. I'm going to be talking to you about .NET today and tomorrow. So is the sound good? It seems a little loud to me. A little loud? Hot mic. But this is fun, right? Big screen. So my name's John Galloway. I work for Microsoft. I'm also, Microsoft donates a lot of my time to the .NET Foundation. I'll talk about that in a minute. And I'm going to be talking to you about .NET today and tomorrow, where we are now, and what's coming. So, one thing that I've always liked about .NET is the promise that if I learn .NET skills, if I get good at C#, VB, F#, whatever, if I get good at a .NET language, and I get familiar with some .NET libraries, and maybe write my own .NET libraries, et cetera, I can bring that stuff around. I can be a web developer by day and write a game on the weekend. Or if my boss says, hey, we need a mobile app, I can do it. And I think that's kind of been true for a long time, and it's becoming really true now. So that's kind of one of the fundamental things I'm going to want to show you over this next, 40 minutes? So, cool. In order to do that, we have a unified platform. So the idea here is, underneath, we've got all these kind of things you can build, and then underneath that, there is standard stuff that you use for building all those things. So that is .NET Standard. Some people get confused by .NET Standard. I like to think of it as just a standard, like HTML is a standard. You don't download, an HTML program. You get a browser. I serve HTML for my website, and we all agree on a standard. So if I'm serving something that complies with, say, HTML5 standards, and you're using an HTML5 browser, everybody's happy. That's the idea with .NET Standard as well. So once we've got that standard, then we have libraries, and then we have this common infrastructure underneath. And in order for all this to be, real and usable everywhere, this is cross-platform. So this, you can run it on Windows, Mac, Linux, Docker, all kinds of stuff. Probably a Raspberry Pi, maybe my watch, who knows. And in order for that to be real, you also need to be able to develop anywhere. So I, like probably many of you, have had times where I was developing an application in .NET, but my designer was on a Mac, and he wasn't able to run my application. He wasn't able to get in there and work on it. And I'm really happy now that a lot of the developers I work with all day long are developing .NET on a Mac, and it works just fine for them, or Linux, et cetera. Before I go farther, how many people here actively develop in .NET regularly? That is cool. You're in the right place. OK, how many people here develop regularly on .NET, not on Windows? Like Mac, Linux, something else. OK, so you could. And honestly, I work with a lot of people in Microsoft working on the .NET team that run 90% of the time on a Mac. Like David Fowler, probably a lot of people know him. He's actually just recently tried getting a Windows laptop again, but he's been working for years on a Mac. So I think that's cool that it's not just it might work, but it's actually something that we develop for. So we're seeing a lot of growth, which is exciting. .NET continues to grow. And we're seeing that it's used by a lot of large companies. One kind of favorite that I've watched over the years is Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow was built using ASP.NET MVC. And it's a large application. It's one of the top sites on the internet. And it's cool lately to watch them as they are moving to .NET Core and watching their performance improvements and watching how their memory usage drops and all that kind of stuff. So we've got this .NET ecosystem, and it's actually supported by an independent foundation. So Microsoft originally created .NET and donated .NET to the .NET Foundation. .NET Foundation is a separate legal entity. So when developers at Microsoft work on .NET, they actually, every time they commit code, they are contributing that code to the .NET Foundation. As well, there are a lot of other community projects that have joined the .NET Foundation. So you'll see a lot, probably, of your favorite, .NET projects and libraries on here, more are joining all the time. So you'll see, some of the big ones like Mono and but then there's also XUnit, NUnit, just all over. So, and actually, this is a slide that I have to keep updating and moving them all around and shrinking the font size down because there's so many of them. So that is cool. So who here actually really knows what the .NET Foundation is? Yeah, I kind of do, and I'm the executive director. Just kidding. I actually really do know, but it takes me a while to explain it sometimes. So really, the idea is that Microsoft cared about .NET so much that when they open sourced it, they looked at what other companies have done. And other companies actually create these foundations. And the way a foundation works is, it is a separate thing where many companies, many people can all work together on one open source project, know that they're all sharing fairly, that one company is not going to take it all away, and also know that even, like, let's say Microsoft just went crazy and said, we're done with .NET. It doesn't matter because .NET code is all owned by the .NET Foundation. Other companies and community could continue on with it. Now, that'll never happen, but I'm just saying that's why foundations exist. So along with Microsoft and the .NET Foundation, there's Red Hat, there's JetBrains, there's Google, there's a lot of other companies and more are continuing to join. So that is kind of shows that not just it's more than Microsoft. You've got the full support of Microsoft plus other companies, which is cool. .NET Foundation also supports meetups. Does anyone here go to a local .NET meetup? Okay, that's cool. And hopefully your meetup is supported by .NET Foundation. We started looking around and we saw that there were tons of meetups and it was hard to find which were .NET meetups and find one near you, and they were all kind of independent. And so we actually created a pro meetup group, and we pay for the meetup pro fees, and that allows you to kind of search for all the .NET meetups, and they're all kind of under one umbrella. So we're seeing huge growth on this. We launched this program just over a year ago, and we've had 140,000 members so far and continuing to join. That's neat. This is one of those slides where when I have a longer time to talk, I tell a story. I'm going to tell it really quick, but this is it's been a progression for .NET open source. It originally, when .NET was created, Microsoft released it under specification. So ECMA 335 is actually a specification allowing anyone else to create .NET. They could all theoretically make their own .NET. And there really wasn't anything except Mono. Mono saw that, and they're like, OK, we can do that. And we'll see more about that over time. In 2002, they did begin the Mono project. It was a ton of work because they couldn't look at the source code for .NET. They had to look at all the new features and create them all on their own and run on all different platforms. In 2008, MVC project was started. This was a big deal. I'm a big fan of MVC. I wrote several books on it. It was fun to see how MVC worked differently from .NET in the past. It did things like relied on open source libraries. It was shipped under open source licenses. It wasn't fully open sourced as a project because we didn't make it easy for you to contribute code back, but you could at least get the code, right? We released that code under an open source license. So you could, following the license, make your own version of MVC if you wanted. In 2014, then we actually went a lot further by releasing an entire stack. So Roslyn, now you have a compiler that's open source and cross-platform. Along with that, we created the .NET Foundation. So as part of releasing Roslyn, we also said, here, it's released and contributed to this foundation. 2014, .NET Core. This was the kind of real cross-platform project. And then Mono finally joining .NET Foundation in 2016. So this is great because Mono, along with Xamarin joining Microsoft, Mono doesn't have to re-implement everything from scratch. We're able to share code. Everything's also under licenses that are easy to share back and forth. And I'll look at some other stuff there. This is really neat. A lot of projects are open sourced, but there's still just a small internal group that creates things. That's not the way it works with .NET. we see a huge and growing amount of open source contributions. So these are community accepted pull requests. You see the huge ramp up over time. So this is really cool to see. And you'll see on the, this is a Cloud Native Computing Foundation ranks highest velocity open source projects, and you'll see .NET is high up there, and you'll also see Microsoft Docs, which is pretty cool. So we're actually, doing a lot of really cool open source stuff. So over the rest of the time, I'm going to talk about, where .NET is right now, what we've just shipped, and what's coming up soon. In order for me to keep this all straight, because Microsoft throws a lot at you, and it's hard to keep up. It's my job to keep up, and I have a tough time. So in order for me to keep it all in my head, I try and think of themes of what each kind of version was. I think of .NET Core 1.0 as kind of like, okay, here is the actual shipping version. We'd been doing betas forever, and we finally had to say, here's a 1.0. We had to ship something, here it is, it's shipped, right? .NET Core 1.1 is the update. You've all shipped a 1.1 update where you say, okay, we shipped 1.0, and here's some things we broke, sorry. 2.0, once we actually shipped 1.1 and companies started using .NET Core seriously, they ran into things that we had removed from .NET Framework. So we'd shipped .NET Framework, and then we had .NET Core, and they said, well, we'd like to use this, but you don't have these XML features or these link features or that kind of thing. So we added over 25,000 APIs into .NET Core 2.0 to allow that. A big thing that shipped in 2.1 is that it got a lot faster. And I'll tell you the story of how that worked in a bit. Upcoming things, .NET Core 2.2, there's a lot of microservices support in there. And .NET Core 3.0, there's some cool stuff for the desktop. So this is kind of how I keep it straight in my head. So these things have all shipped. I'm going to show you some features here because there's some cool new stuff you may not know of. And then I'll show you some upcoming things of .NET Core 2.2 and 3.0. Cool? All right. So yeah, who here is actually running in production on .NET Core 2.1? Okay. And out of those, anybody see big improvements in speed, in performance, drops in memory, whatever? I like to watch on Twitter, and I'll see people say things like, hey, we updated our servers and we saw double in speed or whatever. Another nice thing is we actually increased the build times, or decreased the build times. Yeah. Now, 25% longer build. Yeah. So here are some other cool features in .NET Core 2.1. So there's the, like I said, in 2.0, we shipped a lot more APIs that were kind of missing. In 2.1, we continued that. There's also a lot of features in ASP.NET Core 2.1 for GDPR and security that makes that easier. And then microservices and performance improvements, and we'll look at that. Yeah, so performance improvements. There's this group that does performance testing for web frameworks called Tech Empower. And this is not run by Microsoft anything. This is just some people on the internet that want the internet to be faster. So they do these benchmarks. And when we first started building ASP.NET Core, we looked at where we were on these benchmarks. And out of all these hundreds of frameworks, we were way down in here. We were pretty bad. Thank you. Let me see. Okay. Maybe if I do this and do this. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Some audiences let me go for 10 minutes. And then I look at the screen, I'm like, thanks, guys. So yeah, okay, so this is Tech Empower. Fortunately, you didn't miss much. Tech Empower, when we started looking at this, we were way near the bottom. We were okay. I mean, Stack Overflow ran on us. I mean, they did pretty well performance-wise, but we could be better. And we talked to people, and they said, hey, we're moving to Node because Node's faster. And we thought, well, that's a shame because .NET should be really fast. It's a statically compiled language. There's some really cool stuff that we have in the compiler. Could we make this faster? And so over time, we've worked quite a bit on that. And you'll see here now we are 6th on the list for Fortunes. So Fortunes is a real-world kind of performance. This actually does, reads and writes to the database and stuff. The other thing you'll see is that a lot of these other frameworks are ones you've kind of never heard of, and you're going to be writing in C++ and like really wacky stuff. So I like to think that we are kind of one of the fastest, like actual real-world frameworks out there. You'll see also plain text. This one's kind of fun. We are in this top list somewhere here. There we are, number 7. And we're actually like hitting the limits of the network speed. So we're helping Tech and Power upgrade their actual gear so that they can run faster, so we can keep moving up. So this is pretty cool. One of the reasons that we moved up, or that we got fast in Tech and Power, was because of a few things. One is community contributions. So there's this guy, Ben Adams, and he started contributing quite a bit. And so, yeah, so this is where we are right now. So we are significantly faster than the other ones. Of course, there's all kinds of benchmarks can be all over the place, but we do like that this is not run by Microsoft. This is a standard out there. Anyone can, if the node people say, hey, this isn't fair, they can keep contributing faster. They can do pull requests to go faster. So you'll see, 2.1 got even faster. I'm going to keep moving along. Bing runs on Core 2.1 and got a lot faster. Yes, let's talk about why we're faster. So the way that web servers work is they actually process a lot of text. They hit a URL, they get a bunch of HTML, they concatenate strings, they read headers, it's all strings. And dealing with strings in .NET, it's really easy to waste memory, which causes garbage collection. So whenever the garbage collector kicks in, then everything goes really slow. And so the best thing you can do, especially for a web server, is to minimize your memory use so that you minimize garbage collection. So what they did was they created a separate cross-platform web server called Kestrel. Kestrel is actually a NuGet package. So you can take a console app, add the Kestrel NuGet package, and you've built a web server, which is kind of neat. So, but the way they made Kestrel so fast was they actually managed their own memory. So they would take chunks of memory, and they would keep track of pointers, and they had unsafe code, and the code was actually horrible to look at. Like it was brilliant, but it scared me, and I would never contribute to it, and most people were scared of it. So there were a few really smart people out there contributing, and it was really fast, but we couldn't reuse that anywhere. So then they said, what if we took that kind of style of programming and we put that into the .NET framework? So they created span of T and some other intrinsics like that. And what they let you do is take a chunk of memory and read and write from it without copying it. So you're not allocating in order to manipulate that code. So here's an example of how that speeds things up. If you're taking a string builder and appending to it 100,000 times, in .NET Core 2.0, it was taking 6 milliseconds and allocating some number of bytes. And .NET Core 2.1, no changes to the code at all, just because .NET Core 2.1 now uses this span internally, then it allocates no memory at all, right? So that's pretty neat. Also, here's a look at some stuff with strings where we took lowercase and uppercase. And again, this is just by taking that kind of span, and we used span all through .NET Core 2.1 internally. So we updated our string uppercase and lowercase to use span. And you can see here where we dropped, in the second case here where we're actually, this string was already lowercase and we're just checking that, it's now allocating 0 bytes. So this is an example just of strings, and it goes all through .NET Core 2.1. So you'll see a lot of cases where you take your binary, run it on .NET Core 2.1, and all of a sudden it's a lot faster. So that's cool. So yeah, some other neat things in .NET Core 2.1, there's global tools. So global tools lets you do things like, here's an example. We use .NET DevCerts to install a developer cert. Oops. Right, so this is run when we install .NET Core 2.1. You can use this to manage things. There's others. If I go tools, I get the order wrong sometimes. Here's some I've installed. So there's ones that we ship, and you can also build your own. So these are command line apps, and for instance, I can, there's this one .NET Outdated, and I can run that inside a project, and it'll tell me which of my NuGet packages are outdated. So that's cool. We talked about span-at. We actually use sockets now internally. So we used to use libuv for our web server, and that was because that's what Node used, and it was fast, and it was cross-platform. But over time, we said, we could actually build this faster ourselves using sockets now, because our socket implementation is good enough. So by default, we're running on sockets now, and that's improving performance and also makes installing a lot easier. Some other stuff. There's Windows Compatibility Pack, allowing you to use Windows features when you're running .NET Core 2.1 on Windows. A lot of stuff for EF, and then a lot of cool features for ASP.NET Core 2.1, and I actually just want to show you those. So yeah, even more features for ASP.NET Core 2.1. Tons of features. Again, some of these don't fit into the little kind of simple packages that I like to say, but I think a lot of these features come into making my day-to-day work as an ASP.NET Core developer easier. And I think, we also shipped SignalR service. Who here actually ships a product or uses SignalR in production, like heavily? I love, this is really cool. Whenever I go to a conference and talk about SignalR, people will tell me later about that they have a business running on SignalR, or they have like medical devices, or they have all kinds of crazy stuff. It's really cool to hear. So SignalR makes it really easy to do real-time communications. It also has a feature where you can set up a backplane where you can have, as you need to scale and you talk to lots of clients, you have multiple back-end servers, and the back-end servers keep in sync, and all your front-end clients can talk to multiple back-ends and all that. That's hard to set up. That's a pain. I've tried to do it, and it's been frustrating. So now we actually ship a service, and you can, in under 5 minutes, create a new SignalR service, and then in one line of code, you can point your front end, you can point to this SignalR service. So I'll show you a little bit about that. And I want to show some demos, so I'm going to skip those slides. So let's talk about ASP.NET Core 2.1. I'll show you some quick features on that. One nice thing we did was we made it easier for you to work with HTTPS. So if I do, file new project, okay, so I'm going to create a web application. You'll see this down here, configure for HTTPS. So that's checked by default, and we set that up to make it easy for you to work with HTTPS. Let me see. I think I do want to do, I'm going to do authentication here. I guess I won't. I'm trying to decide what I can fit in here. So there's features that work if I don't, and there's features that work if I do, so there's cool stuff either way. Let me show you the HTTPS first. So the first time you run a project after you've created it, you've got an HTTPS cert is installed for you by default. Visual Studio will do it, or it runs in command line as well. So there's this thing right here where it says use HTTPS redirection. There's also this thing in here where if we go to launch settings, it actually configures an HTTP and an HTTPS. It sets it up for both IIS and if you're running in command line. So here's my HTTP and HTTPS. So if I run this, and oh, you can't see it, but I'm living on the edge. I'm living on the edge here. I'm actually running .NET Core 3.0 previews, so maybe it'll work. OK, so here you can see. Whoop. So here's this installed cert. This is a local cert that we create for you. So it installs locally, and you can test and develop in HTTPS. Now, because of this HTTPS redirection, if I go to 58890, whoa, that was cool. How did I pull that off? Yeah. It redirected. Well, pretend like I did that right the first time. So that's kind of cool, actually. So this is how you want it to work. You want people to be able to browse to your site in HTTP, and we'll just redirect them to HTTPS. What this allows me to do is develop from file new project using HTTPS, and not the wrong way, which is develop in HTTP, deploy to production, then my boss says, hey, that site needs to be SSL or HTTPS, and then I convert it to HTTPS, and then a lot of my CSS and images and things are broken. Right? So that's cool. Some other neat stuff we've got. There is the ability to add in, oops, don't want to spoil that surprise. I can add in identity later. So identity has been kind of a problem for a while for me. When I create a project, I think, do I want to add identity or not? And if I don't add it, then later if I did want it, then I have to create a new project and copy all the files in and change the namespaces, and I bet some of you have done that before, right? That's a pain. Or I say, I'm never going to do that again. I'm going to add identity to every single project. But now I have a ton of extra files in my project. I think I have a slide with that. Nope. Well, it's a lot of extra files. It's ugly. And so what we've done now is we've solved kind of both of those problems. So I can go in here and I can say add new scaffolded item. And there's a new thing on the list here is identity. So this pops up a form with tiny print, which I will zoom in on. So this says, it allows me to pick a layout. It allows me to say, add all the, it allows me to override the layout or to override the markup for specific views. So if I want to change just the login and log out, I can check those. And then I can say, we need a new data context, and we need a new user class. So what it's going to do is, it's going to add a NuGet package to my project that has all these views built in. And it actually serves those views out of the NuGet package. So I don't have them cluttering up my project. If I want to change the markup for any of them, I can just do right-click, scaffold, and check those files, and it'll add them into my project. So then when identity runs, it'll say, do you already have those files? If the files are on my disk, so if the files are there, it'll use my version, and I can go in and start changing those around. If not, it'll pull them out of this NuGet package. So that's pretty neat. And that actually, the way we did that, we set that up so you can use that too. So if you want to ship, let's say you want to ship a NuGet package and you want it to have UI in it as well. You can go in and you can create a Razor library. And this Razor library can just have Razor in it, and then that's included in your project. So let's imagine you're shipping some security thing or some middleware or maybe a store as a NuGet package, and you want to be able to configure it in the web app, you can do that using this. So the one other thing I want to show you or I guess I'll probably just explain because I'm running short on time. The other thing we did is adding for GDPR. We made it a lot easier for you to, for your users to go in and you can download your data as a JSON file. So I can log into the site, click on my profile, and I can download my data, or I can say delete my data, and it actually removes it from the site. There's also support for cookie compliance. So there's a header thing, and until you accept cookies, we won't write any cookies. And then this makes it a lot easier for you to set that up on your own. I've had to set up GDPR compliance on several websites, and it's a lot of work. And so this actually makes it a ton easier. I wish it had shipped before I had to do all that work. But so the one other thing I want to show you is SignalR. And this is just a cool example. This demo here, this is actually an example of where you could use SignalR. All of these airplanes are actually moving. And so in this example, let's say you wanted to you've got hundreds of thousands of people, or even hundreds of people connected to this. This doesn't scale too well because it's sending all that information to multiple clients. So this flight map demo is actually, it's out on GitHub. It's the Azure SignalR team gives you the code for that. And the neat thing with this, here if I go. So with one line of code, it's not 0 lines of code. We don't like demos with 0 lines of code anymore, right? I know. But this is basically, this is it, where on the line that says add SignalR, I say .add Azure SignalR. And then when I do that, it's going to look for a connection string to my SignalR service running in Azure. And setting that up, like I said, it takes like 5 minutes. And when you're done, you click on copy connection string. And you can add that to your user secrets, or you can add it to your environment variables. And it'll pull that in, and it connects to your SignalR backend. So that's pretty cool. If you're interested, look up that SignalR flight map, or I can give you a link to it. It's pretty cool code. All right. So those are some of my favorite features in .NET Core 2.1. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep rocking it ahead. Whoa, that's a slow fade. Dramatic, it needs music. All right, so .NET Core 2.2 is in preview. And we're getting kind of towards the end of the previews. We've shipped preview 3 of it. And so the latest announced thing was shipping Q4, so by end of year. And so here's some of the stuff in there. A lot of the work has gone into improve web API development, making it easier for you to build and consume web APIs. Also work on microservices and Azure. And this one's, we just put this on every slide because we do. There's still continuing to be tons of work going in on performance improvements. So I'm a nerd. I just watch this stuff on the GitHub, on the pull requests and stuff. And there's one of the things that they added to .NET Core recently is support for SIMD, and so machine code instructions. So you can basically, if you need to search a array of bytes and say, does this array of bytes contain this sequence, or or to and or numbers together or stuff. If you call these instructions the right way on the right CPUs, it can actually do multiple steps at once, or it can do them a lot faster. And so I continue to see pull requests and changes where they're including that. So they're doing these machine-level optimizations, and they run ultra fast on the right CPUs. So that's neat. Okay, so there's multi-tier JIT compilation. This is really cool. The idea with multi-tier JIT is the just-in-time compiler takes your IL and converts it to machine code. And it has to make a trade-off. We don't want your app to start up too slow, so we can't take too long on it. But because we have to JIT kind of quickly, then we don't make your code quite as fast as it could be. And so what we've done here is we watch the code as it runs, and we say, hey, this part here is being called multiple times, and we really should take the time to optimize this. So while your application's running, it actually can re-JIT it specific parts of code and make those parts much faster. So your application still starts up quickly, but then we optimize the performance. So I think that's pretty neat. That I believe I forget if it's on or off by default in 2.2. But regardless, it's like a one line in your project to change. A lot of stuff for EF Core. So EF Core, and I watch as they're authoring blog posts, and they have a new blog post coming out, I believe, this week, so with more stuff. And then ASP.NET Core. So some neat stuff in here. One is updating for templates. So Bootstrap 4 with all kinds of goodies like Flexbox, and I think a lot of it's gotten simpler now with modern web standards and stuff. So that's neat. Update also for Angular 6, and working with the CLI. So this allows you to create a project and then drop to the Angular CLI and update or scaffold things, and it all works cleanly together. A lot of other stuff, Web API performance, HTTP2, so that's pretty neat. So much good stuff. Health checks is also really fun. So health checks allows you to write some code that allows something else to call into your application and make sure that it's healthy. So you can set up an endpoint in your code and like /health check, and when you call, or /database health check or whatever. And so then when you call into that, this little chunk of code will say, can I connect to the database? Whatever. It can do multiple different checks to make sure the cache is ready and all that kind of stuff. And it'll return healthy or not healthy. And so then things like Traffic Manager or other DNS endpoints, or you can have something set up to page you or call you or email you or all of the above if your site's down. So that's a pretty neat feature there. All right. So I'm going to show you a little bit here. I'm not going to take super long because I also want to show you .NET Core 3.0. So let's go. One thing is I think the main thing I want to show you here, I've got a couple of things, but I've also got .NET Core 3.0 stuff. Here it is. OK. So when you're developing an API application, it's not as easy to develop as a web app sometimes because you can't just refresh the page and see what's happening. And if you run run a controller, all you get, you might get a 404 on the website, or you might just get a chunk of data. It's not very easy to analyze what's there. So like, for instance, let's run this. Well, if it had run, it would have given me a 404 because there's no controller on this. So what we've actually done now is we've created this HTTP REPL. So if I go in here, if I run just this one, let's see, and if it doesn't work, I'm just going to talk about it because I don't want to waste time and miss out on my Core 3.0 demos. The idea is there is this HTTP. I think that's it. Without the dash? Yeah. So what this does is you can point this. Here it says disconnected. So I can actually configure this as a browser and browse my HTTP client using that. So I can say, set base, and then I could give it, be HTTPS, whatever, or I could go right, something like that, and I can go through and browse, and I can, start navigating an API like that. So, so this is kind of helpful. I don't have to I don't necessarily have to run out and get like Postman or something like that, or Fiddler. We also have support in here for Swagger documentation. So I think I have a better one that actually works. If I don't, I'm going to bail out because I'm more excited about showing you the new ones. So I'll tell you two more other cool things that we've got in here. And again, I think API demos are like, if you're writing APIs and debugging APIs and stuff, it's like, yes, this saves my time, but they're not like super flashy on the screen things. But we've got two other things that are helpful in here. One is there's some analyzers. And you actually, as you go through an API, these analyzers will go through and say something like, if I'm doing a get, I should be returning specific things, like I should return a not found. And so there are specific like RESTful expected return types. So there's two steps to this. One is, if I take that out, these analyzers may show up. There's these analyzers that'll say, hey, you probably should have returned this or that from this API. And so then they'll actually, when I go in and start clicking on the analyzers, they will start adding a bunch of attributes. But then I get tons of attributes on each method. And those are kind of ugly and hard to manage. And so actually then, there's another thing here where we have support for these API conventions. So just by adding this to the top, this default API conventions, it'll automatically add that to your return types. So if you're interested in these, there's some good blog posts on exactly what they're doing, and there's a good long 1-hour session on the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up where we go into these in detail. But I want to show you ASP.NET Core 3.0, and so I'm going to move on. So you'll expect .NET Core 2, the last announced was Q4, so I would expect end of year-ish. .NET Core 2. So .NET Core 2 really was focused on web and cloud. I mean, you could, that was kind of the sweet spot, right, for building things with .NET Core 2. And so we've done a lot of work in .NET Core 3 to make it so that you can use them, that you can bring this onto those other platforms. So I'll show you some stuff with desktop and desktop workloads and UI. So why would you care about .NET Core for desktop? Well, some nice things like being able to use modern controls in your existing WPF or WinForms applications. Being able to use Windows 10 APIs and things like that. So definitely the ability to modernize an existing desktop application. So it's also useful for .NET Core, excuse me. Yeah, so we talk regularly to large customers who have hundreds or thousands even of desktop applications they use internally. And these could be WinForms or WPF apps. And they have difficulty managing them because you can only have one .NET Framework version deployed to a client machine. And so they have a lot of trouble updating and managing that. And what they'd really like to be able to do is do side-by-side deployment like you can with .NET Core. And so one of the kind of huge things that we're bringing in for desktop is the ability to do side-by-side on the desktop. And then, of course, like all those performance things I was showing you, that's something we'd love to have on the desktop as well. I'm going to talk about this slide and then show some demos. So we have recently announced, and a lot of this is just saying what most people already had figured out or had seen, but our real focus on new, fast, crazy, late-breaking changes is in .NET Core. And this makes sense because you can have multiple versions of .NET Core on your machines. So it's very easy to, like if I go to the command line and do .NET, is that it? I have tons of .NET SDKs. Sorry, my type foo is not going well today. I probably have about 20, right? So, and I don't care. They don't break each other, right? But if I have multiple versions of .NET Framework, or I can't do that, right, with .NET Framework. So there's a big blog post if you look on the .NET blog recently, and really the focus is that, quick, fast, new, exciting changes, those come to .NET Core, and for .NET Framework, we're really focusing on not breaking things. So slow, stable. We are shipping security patches. We are shipping things that are really focused on things like security protocols, bug fixes, Windows features, that kind of stuff. So continuing to update .NET Framework. But the real focus for fast, quick-moving changes and things goes to .NET Core. So if you have existing projects running on .NET Framework, don't freak out. They'll still work. We'll still support them. If you're doing new development, we recommend looking at .NET Core. And I think I want to show you demos. So one quick thing I want to show you. This is a desktop application. So we've got this is actually a Telerik pie chart control. And we didn't do anything special. We just took a WinForms application with a pie chart control that looks at a directory and adds up all the files. So you can see that here. So if I go cool. So I'm just going to go to documents. I don't know how big that's going to be. Sure. And let's take a look at how long it takes to run. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have done documents. Usually, if I have to speed through it all, recycle bin, that would be cool. Okay, I'm going to take just a tiny one. So we're not really going to see the performance benefits, but I'll just tell you what they are. So there's that. Now we took this, and this is running in .NET Core. So I'll do set as startup. I didn't do this run with debug. So. Great. I forget. I think it was this one. Two milliseconds. So this is showing like 10 times faster. Normally, I see this at about twice as fast. But this is going from, the cool thing here is this is actually .NET Core running with the desktop. Now, we actually can do something like if I go, so that's crazy. So I'm actually creating a WinForms app. And if I can do, right? So that's a WinForms app. And then if I do, and I could do the same with WPF as well, right? .NET do WPF. So I get the advantages in here of even simple things like I've got a simple CS proj, right? So that's pretty nice. And then also this is just standard .NET code, so that's neat. Let me show you one final thing, and that is the ability to package this up. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say package. Publish. There it is. So this is something I've wanted in .NET since the beginning of time. This is the ability to publish as a single exe. So here I'm taking the Telerik control, the the file browser, all that stuff, and I'm publishing it as a single exe. And this is publishing just to my desktop. And so that is 68 megs, and this is an early version, so it's actually going to continue to get faster. And this is that same thing. So this I could take just that exe, pop that on a USB stick, give it to anyone. They don't need to have any special version of .NET Core installed or anything, and that's a single redistributable exe. So I think that's pretty exciting. So those are some of the things in .NET Core 3.0. Some other neat stuff I'm going to be showing later is Blazor. I'll be showing that at my session tomorrow. And also watch for Tibby's session later today, where he'll be talking about .NET Core and .NET Core, all the where are we at and that kind of stuff. So the thing for finding out everything about .NET, go to dot.net. Please talk to me here at the conference. And keep an eye out for .NET Core 2.2 shipping, end of the year timeframe, and .NET Core 3 next year. So thanks a lot.